Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Jessica and Liz on the show. Jessica and Liz both use martial arts as a way to heal from past trauma and abuse. Liz is an abuse survivor and also has a prison ministry. But what a lot of people do not know is that Liz also practices jiu-jitsu, and it's been very healing for her. So welcome to the show, Liz.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi, Liz. This is Karen. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you, Karen?
I'm good. Can you tell our listeners how you developed a passion for jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up playing sports. I was involved in many sports in high school. I played a little bit of college softball, but never any contact sport. And then I, as an adult, was introduced to full contact karate. And so I trained in that for a couple of years, and full contact karate is good for self-defense where you have multiple people. And then somebody that I knew was training jiu-jitsu. And so I observed some classes and I observed the community and I tried a class and I had fun at the class, but I wasn't ready to commit yet. And so I had an opportunity that came up, a women's only class for jiu-jitsu in another state while I was on vacation. And it was at that women's only class where there were no expectations and I just had fun. And so I just laughed through the whole class and everybody was so helpful and it felt very empowering to learn some of the moves, because with jiu-jitsu, it's about throwing your partner to the ground and then wrestling into a position or into a submission, but it's also a partner sport. And so it was just fun to work with another female and just kind of learn this in a safe environment. And when I left that class, I was hooked. And so when I came back to home, I signed up at a jiu-jitsu school and I've been training for about 7 years. And it's amazing. It's a journey. I mean, God has me doing my nonprofit right now full time. And so I haven't trained in the past year, but I'm still very in touch with the community. And it's added so much to my life. And I've just been through different stages over the years. And I know it's something that I'll always go back to, but it's just been something that's been very incredibly powerful and empowering for me. And then I just learning the self-defense aspect, had asked my school if I could teach women's jiu-jitsu. And so I taught women's jiu-jitsu for a while, and just to see the teenagers grow and the adults feel empowered and to have us have fun and to laugh, but to learn how to protect ourselves, learn how to communicate with a partner. And then just to see little girls in the school look up to us, right? And so just kind of building confidence in them. It was incredible. So yeah, I can't say enough great things about it. And I'm just honored and humbled. And there's just so many lessons to learn through training.
I love that you say that it was fun and you were laughing the whole time, because for me, I'm just not that serious of a person. So to me, that's very appealing. I know it sounds a little odd.
You made it sound like, gosh, I want to go out and do it right away.
We're like, we're going to do jiu-jitsu now for sure. My son's taking it and he absolutely loves it. He just started. My oldest.
Yeah,
he's
awesome.
26. So can you explain how jiu-jitsu has been part of your healing journey?
Absolutely. So I've again, kind of been through different stages of my healing while training throughout these years. And so when I first started, it was more just about learning. And so in a helping profession, I'm a social worker. There's a lot of vicarious trauma through that. And so working where I do, it's just very stressful at times. And so at that point in time, when I was training, when you're training for this, it's like a chess game. So you're always doing something new. It's a sport where the more you know, the less you know. So you're always learning more as you advance. And so with that, I just was learning a lot at that time. It was a distraction from work. It's one of the only things that made me forget about work or any stress going on in my life. I competed. I thought it was fun to compete and to challenge myself. So I would compete in tournaments, and just through the competing in tournaments, you train your body. you eat healthy, you have a goal, and then it just helps when you are going through traumatic things in your life just to have that goal to focus on. And the gym is always open, so you're always there to train.
Yeah, I think it's important when you're healing to do something where you're like that. You have to have a plan and you're focused, because when your brain is an amygdala hijack or fight or flight, you have to redirect it. And so that is a great activity. And the things that you said, those are skills that are, I think, for healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, any kind of exercise it's like an antidepressant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
So it has many benefits.
Yeah. When I get off the treadmill, I feel a lot better than before I got on there.
So it's funny because the name of my nonprofit is Hope in Motion. But when you are going through trauma, or if you're going through your healing journey, there is hope in motion. There's hope in movement. And so it's not just addressing what you're going through, but when you're doing it in movement, whether it's through walking or stretching or just doing something, it's very, very healing. And I know when I was competing, you learn tunnel vision when you're competing. So you're prepared to fight, you're prepared for fight or flight, but you still get that tunnel vision. And so when you go through that, you learn confidence that if you were to get attacked somewhere, how's your body going to react, And so I went through that. And then I kind of transitioned from competing to more of the healing, because in jiu-jitsu, you're exposed, right? And so every insecurity is exposed. While I was training and while I was healing post-divorce and being a trauma survivor, that's when I started feeling to heal. Yeah. So however that's phrased, because I'm still a little nervous. But yeah, so I learned of my roots, right? So when I was in my abusive relationship, I learned that I was the enabler. And I started looking at, why was I the enabler? And so I started looking at the roots from that. Where did that come from? And so I'm very big into intergenerational trauma. And so I look back on the whys. What set me up for that kind of relationship? It wasn't something that was wrong with me, but I just didn't know, based on my experience, how to look for some of these red flags. And so I started actually feeling, and then I recognized these things and I saw these roots, and then God replaced them with his truth. And so it broke that root of inferiority. It broke that root of competition. And so I didn't have to prove myself to anybody. My identity came from God. I didn't have to compete in jiu-jitsu for acceptance from my school or from my peers or who I thought needed to accept me. My healing came from being able to state my boundaries and to not owe an explanation. My healing came from just showing up. My healing came from teaching other people. So it was incredibly powerful to just kind of go through that spectrum of healing and to come to that place where I don't have to prove myself. If I want to turn down a sparring session or a role, I can say no, and that's okay. I don't owe anybody an explanation.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to do that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's good insight. And I don't know, when you said that, it made me think of, we had Bob Hamp on, and I remember him saying it wasn't something that was wrong with you. It was something that was right.
Yeah.
It's like, because you're, probably already just a kind-hearted person, that's, unfortunately, we get taken advantage of when you have that kind of a personality. So it's not that there was something wrong with you. It's that there was something right with you.
Yeah. And I had to deal with that too, thinking I had to take my part in it, and that mine was enabling. It was because I enabled.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And to love someone really isn't to enable and let them,
the most loving thing you can do is set those boundaries.
Yeah. So how would you encourage someone who would like to learn to defend themselves, but maybe is not physically or mentally able to do that?
So I would just encourage them to start somewhere, whether it be watching a class, watching videos online, reading a book, walking around the block, just doing something just to start, because something is better than nothing, right? And the more you do, the more comfortable you get. And so I would just encourage them to start somewhere. Again, jiu-jitsu, it's about your journey. It's not about anybody else's journey. It's not about competing. It's about your journey. And so you go, and if this is a martial art you ever want to try, you do what you can do, and your no is good enough. And that's what I've always told the women from my class. That's one of the first lessons I teach them, is the importance of communication. So jiu-jitsu used to be a very male-dominated sport. So when I first started, it was predominantly men. But I know our women's community has grown, and there's a lot of trauma survivors that don't necessarily talk about what they've been through, but are there to find healing, because people come from all walks of life. And so there's an importance of just kind of communicating your expectation with your partner ahead of time. It's an individual sport, but it's a partner sport. You take care of your partner. So if you're with a guy and, you have a certain expectation when you're working with them, then you say, okay, I want you to go at this level, or, hey, you're being too intense. So I just really encourage them to have the confidence to speak up. And that if something's making them feel uncomfortable, to say it in the moment, because we're also teaching the guys how to be good partners as well.
Mm.
So is there, though, like a course where they just teach self-defense at some places for someone that just wants that for their own protection?
Absolutely. There are tons of martial arts schools that teach women's self-defense. I know Gracie Jiu-Jitsu has a women's program. Sophia McDermott does an online program that you can subscribe to if you want to do something at home just to kind of ease into it. But yes, there are tons of women's programs out there.
Yeah, my youngest does mixed martial arts and he showed me some stuff, but I have those torn discs and I really can't do full blown. I can't move well enough. So like on my upper body. So I would be one of those people that's restricted. I guess that's why I asked those questions. So what should someone look for in an instructor or group that has been through trauma and abuse?
So I always encourage somebody to try multiple schools, to just try out a class or just to walk in and just get a feel for the environment, because every school or place is different. And so just get a feel for the vibe, take a trial class, and then just see how you feel and compare it to other places that you go. And then as an abuse survivor too, it's trust your gut. If you have an off feeling about something, go with that feeling. Like I shared earlier, if you have boundaries and you say, no, I don't want to do this, or no, I don't feel comfortable doing this, how does the professor react? How does the teachers react to you? Or are they respectful of your boundaries? And how do they handle that? So I know a lot of survivors, because there's a women's jiu-jitsu community and social media that supports one another and shares experiences that they've been through. We encourage each other to, if you feel comfortable, share with your instructor a little bit about what you've been through, just so that they have the background and can maybe keep a closer eye, or partner you up with somebody that would be a good fit for you. So it's good to have communication with that person. And again, just kind of going with your feeling.
Would it be a good idea to ask them if they're not really trauma trained, or are they automatically? Or
I would say, just particularly in the jiu-jitsu community, I wouldn't say people are specifically trauma trained, but I would say people might be trauma informed. Okay. And I would just maybe look for the women's community, see how many families are there. I know that there's also male survivors. So it's just kind of like, is it a good vibe in there? Is it family oriented? Are they invested in your learning process? Just kind of getting a good feel for the school.
Okay.
So you'd have to look into, if you wanted to pursue this, you would just start by looking up schools.
Absolutely. And then just trying a free trial class, or just popping in and just watching a class and just seeing how people interact with each other and what the class feels like.
Okay. So we'd like to thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing a little bit of your journey. Every person's healing journey is unique, and we're so glad you found jiu-jitsu and that it's helping you in your healing process.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you all. I appreciate you. Thank you for this time.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to talk to Jessica.
Yeah, it's not easy. Let me tell you what shows up on the mat. And, we've done women's self-defense classes, and my poor sensei, he gets so rattled when a woman walks out. And, I've done it. I don't know if you've ever heard of Itai Gill. He's part of the Mossad, and he came to Arizona. He was training us, and his training was so brutal that I walked out.
Really?
And yeah, there's a lot of trauma-informed care when it comes to how I do Krav Maga.
Yeah, I was going to say that could definitely be triggering.
And I'm just very fortunate, because Grandmaster Joseph Edmondson, he used to teach the self-defense on News Channel 3. He was known as Karate Joe. And so he, in his heart, is teaching women self-defense. So he understands domestic violence. I'm one of his only human trafficking survivors that is able to do Krav Maga. He has quite a few domestic violence ones. And and then I have his program director, Coach Rob, has his teaching certification in special needs. Not that I'm special needs, but he knows how to interact and respond to individuals having triggers.
Right.
And I honestly believe, I tell my trauma doc, I'm like, without the two of them and the community, Coach Joe is very community oriented. It's not drill based. It's about learning the technique. For me, it's just a different environment. And it's been cool because he has affiliates around the nation. So he'll bring them in for training and learning how to have a dojo, but understanding that, you're going to have women in the community that have been through rape. You might get some human trafficking survivors, domestic violence, and how do you interact with, how do you train them, and how do you deal with triggers?
So it's important for our listeners to ask all those questions before they start doing any type of self-defense, correct?
Yes. Yeah. The first dojo I went to, they're very good, but it's very drill based. And they didn't know how, like, I didn't even know I was having triggers until I was suggested by law enforcement, my law enforcement advocate, like, you probably need to learn a self-defense class because, the trafficker is reaching out to me, but he knows how to get around it. It's very smart. And because he wasn't doing the things we needed him to do so that they could do something, right? Because there's this fine line about, you could do a podcast on this on itself. Like, how do you deal with an abuser who is walking this fine line between law and your sanity? And so law enforcement just kind of guide me through it. And they're like, you probably want to learn a self-defense. And I'm like, well, what's the best one? And my particular law enforcement advocate that was helping me, she's like, well, I did Krav Maga. And there's not very many in Phoenix, but it teaches you actual street fighting. And so I went to the first one, and they didn't know how to deal with my triggers. And then COVID happened. And when things opened back up, I found a different one. I found this one. And Coach Rob, he identified it right away. And he's just like, okay, like, breathe. He takes me through breathing. How do you regulate yourself? We want to normalize. Like, there's all these different things that you need to do in order to just do stuff, in order to do martial arts.
I could see how that would be triggering.
So what is the best way to defend yourself against an abuser?
It goes back to that eye contact. It goes back to confidence and knowing that you can defend yourself if you were in a situation.
Okay.
I had a victim, one of our community members who was in an abusive relationship. She wanted to learn how to defend herself. Now, keeping in mind, this is not a normal scenario, but she took about 4 or 5 classes, and it was enough. It was enough that when that abuser put his hands around her neck, she got her knee between them and she pushed herself away, and she was able to get free. And then her confidence just exploded. She was like, oh, I can defend myself. So she called the police. She broke up with him. And
that's great. Yeah. My son forced me to do some martial arts with him after they found out that their dad was abusing me all those years.
I know.
And my other son's learning, I think, jujitsu.
Yeah. Well, we have a lady that's in our group. Who's the chaplain over at the Adobe? She's a purple belt in jujitsu. And I asked her, I'm like, how did you get to a purple belt status? And she goes, I worked with women only. I could only go to the women's only classes.
Oh, okay. So they have women's only classes. That's good.
Yeah.
My dad was a black belt in martial arts. He had just purple in his black belt.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. He got it in his 50s.
Yeah. That's me right now. I'll probably get my black belt when I'm in my 60s.
Yeah. Wow. And what about somebody like I have 4 torn discs in my neck? I can really not move my upper body well, or I don't have much strength and to do that kind of stuff. It's very hard on me. Like, is there ways to work around that, or just use your legs more? It
depends upon the dojo. So my dojo, yes, because I have a torn meniscus in my knee. So
I have that too.
my round kicks suck. And just something I was just telling my trauma doc today, there's this little trauma things that trauma survivors do. Like when we punch, we're very stiff. And I'm not joking. So when you do a hook, you're supposed to turn your knee in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 2 years to get down that move. And so it's repetitiveness, it's working with your body. And the thing that I love about, any probably martial art is you learn your body. You're reassociating yourself with your body. Just as I feel like as a child of God, you learn how to defend yourself against attacks from the enemy. Because my spiritual life just went crazy because I knew how to not defend myself physically, but I also knew how to defend myself spiritually.
Wow.
Interesting.
Not take the enemy's crap.
And you're right. My upper body was super stiff. And what really helped me that I didn't even think about was dancing. I know, especially down in Mexico, I started moving my shoulders a lot more. And I'm not as stiff as I used to be because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize that God was helping me through that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually a much better dancer than I ever thought I was, because my ex-husband never let me dance because he told me I was a horrible dancer.
It's just sad.
I'm like, I didn't dance for 25 years because of that.
Right.
And I was missing out because it makes me feel so free in Christ. I can't explain it.
Well, my childhood, it was just very strange. Like we didn't celebrate Christmas until I was a teenager. And so, just different stories about how, again, rejection and just confusion. And then we started to celebrate it. And then we stopped celebrating it because it was about money and just, when I went through the chaplaincy program and the reason, like the excuses your parents give you on why we're not celebrating Christmas, it has to do with our salvation and God's going to be mad at us if we have a Christmas tree. And then when I became a chaplain, I just remember being so angry because I'm like, you mean to tell me that if I wear a costume or if I happen to have a Christmas tree in my house, it has nothing to do with my salvation?
Wow.
Yeah. The other thing too is we talked about reassociating with self, being able to like the confidence that it build within you. And I think I don't know if I already said this, but just getting to know your body. And one of the things that I learned when it comes to trauma-informed care and working with trauma survivors is acceptance of our experiences, what happened. And we kind of want to push it away all the time. And then being able to move through it. So my 51st birthday was this past weekend. And I asked myself, what do I want to do? And Hoyler Gracie, so part of the Gracie Combatives and Gracie Humida was in town and I did his workshop. And I have to be very careful. We have to be very careful which students work with me because if they go too far, it causes this trigger. And there is this language we talk in martial arts. So we were learning to do a neck crank. And I have been wanting to learn this move for years. And so finally, we're going to learn it from Hoyler Gracie. I'm so excited to learn this move. And so we were doing it. And part of the thing is you have to put your arm underneath the person and then you move your body. So you're cranking their neck in a very uncomfortable position. And I was getting ready to do the move. And all of a sudden, a memory popped up. And I was like, oh my gosh. And everybody's looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm like, yes, yeah, I just need a moment. And they're like, what's going on? I said, a memory is flooding me right now. And it's a new memory. And I'm like trying to figure out the sensation in my body because it's a feeling. And then you have the memory, the visual inside your head. And I just kind of sat there for a second and they were all just like, I was just like, that's new. I wasn't able to continue with the move. I had to step away. And there's what they call recalibration. If you get into a really deep trigger, if you walk around for about a minute, it resets your brain so you can go back into the class or into the move that you were doing. And so for me, my response is I have a gag, like I gag or I throw up. And so I had to stop that particular move. But it was just really proud of myself in that particular workshop. I only had 2 episodes. We were also doing an escape from a chokehold up against the wall. And so I was able to do that one without really any response. So just different things. There's just a lot.
If somebody doesn't want to, they're too traumatized, they only want to learn it just to defend themselves from any further abusers or if they ever get in a bad situation, just to protect themselves. Is that possible at all?
It is. I recommend not doing classes. You can do one-on-ones. We have quite a few survivors, people that will come in and they can't do the classes. But if you work with a coach one-on-one that understands your triggers and, and even like, I think body limitations too.
Yeah. Cause this might be too much for too many people.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do full martial arts, but I would like to, like my son taught me a few things. I don't know if I remember them, but I'm going to have him show me again.
Is a trigger from just people that have had physical situations, or could it be any kind of triggering?
So something very common we found among the survivors that come and attend our workshops is hair pulls, touching people's head.
Interesting.
And I think in our class, it's obviously the hands, it's the body, because like where somebody's body is on top of yours, and then chokes and hair pulls. So those are the 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see how this would be triggering.
Okay, so like emotional abuse or spiritual abuse isn't triggered through when you're doing any type of self-defense?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. That's what you meant, right?
Yes.
Kind
yeah,
of.
physical. It's usually physical touch.
What you meant, kind of. That's what Karen's question was more pertaining.
Okay.
So it's more like physical abuse. So the physical sensation is what's causing the triggers.
Yes.
Okay, that makes total sense. So There'll probably be a lot of people that just want to learn how to protect themselves. So that's good to know. So where can they go? What should they do if they're looking for a class? How do they find one?
It depends upon like the type of martial arts they want to do. I Googled Krav Maga classes near me.
How do you even spell that? And how you say it, how you spell it.
Krav Maga, it's Hebrew. It's the Israeli self-defense. So Krav Maga was designed for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. So Krav Maga is Hebrew for...
Aaron cracks me up.
And it's spelled...
Google it if I
don't know how to spell it.
know what you said.
It's Krav, second word, Maga. Krav Maga.
Oh, it's easier than it just sounds harder. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
We're goofballs. All right. Well, that's going to be a great podcast.
Yeah. So Krav Maga is Israeli, it's Hebrew, and it means contact combat.
Okay.
Okay.
Trauma-informed martial art.
Trauma-informed martial arts, right? And if they prefer to go and try to ask for a class with all women, obviously. I don't think I can around men.
We keep trying to do ours. So in our dojo, one of my teachers, and she's also an advocate with fire, is Coach Beth. She's a blue belt in Krav Maga. She's a domestic violence survivor. She spoke at the 2021 City of Mesa domestic violence event. And she also has her bachelor's in psychology. So I like to attend her classes.
Wow, good combination there.
Yeah. People are like, do you carry a firearm or do you have a firearm? I'm like, yeah, I used to carry a firearm. I have firearms. My house is not one you want to rob because I have lots of weapons, but I no longer carry a firearm because if you're going to bring a firearm to the party, I'll just take yours.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That would shut him up like, ooh.
Wow.
Yeah, you could put that in there.
Ooh, yeah, I like that one. That's a good one. It's fun.
The war is real. The battle is real.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Love you guys. Have a great evening.
All right,
All
bye.
you too.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, I'll use your photos. That I'm so excited. I just really want to be
I'm
able
going
to
to give you the one of me in my Krav Maga shirt, my orange belt.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.